We've been told that whole grain rice or brown rice is so much healthier for us than white rice. In fact, I've said the same thing to myself. But here is a little secret about a toxic component that's found in all rice. Today, I am going to reveal what that is, but more importantly, what we all can do about it to help keep our rice as healthy as it possibly can. I'm Dr. Joanette, longevity expert, professor of medicine, and a proud native of a blue zone. Blue zones are those little pockets around the world of people who live into their hundreds with vitality and health. So let's jump in and discover what that toxic secret is that is lurking in all of our rice. I have here some brown rice, some purple or black rice, and some white rice. The difference between your darker colored rices and your white rice is that your darker rices still have the germ and the bran intact. That is those outer layers of the rice, whereas your white rice, which is refined, has had that removed. The result is that your white rice, actually, we've been told, has a higher glycemic index because it breaks down rapidly into carbohydrates in our gut and can spike our sugar. So today we're going to learn how to prevent that, but more importantly, we are going to learn how to remove the arsenic that is in our rice. Arsenic is a heavy metal. It's a toxic heavy metal. It's toxic to our brain. It's toxic to our body. It is a pro-cancer or a cancer-promoting, tumor-promoting metal, and it also poisons our metabolism and our mitochondria. The U.S. Health Department recommends that we have no more than 9 parts per million of arsenic in our water supply, but there is no recommendation for how much arsenic we can have in our foods. That little piece of information was fairly surprising to me because in whole grain rice, your brown rice, your black rice, your purple rice, and your pink rice, they all have around 150 parts per million of arsenic. Even your white rice has about 90 parts per million. Remember, 10 parts per million is the maximum allowable amount in our drinking water. Arsenic is water soluble and comes from a number of sources. Many people believe that arsenic comes from the pesticides and the herbicides that we apply and use on our crops. That actually is the smallest contributor to the total amount of arsenic in our groundwater and in our food supply. Most of the arsenic actually comes from rocks and minerals within rocks that are heavy in arsenic, that the arsenic then gets released by a number of processes, natural processes like volcanic activity and geothermal type activity, or man-made processes like mining and smelting and power production. All of those put a lot of arsenic into our groundwater, which then gets into the water used to water the rice paddies, the rice fields. Rice is a very good absorber of that arsenic, and most of that arsenic is in that outer layer or in the bran and germ of the rice. So if you're going to eat rice, this goes counterintuitive to most of what we've been told about what foods are healthy. We've been told that whole foods, unrefined foods are better for you and healthy for you, and this is correct with the exception of rice. Your white rice or refined rice is actually the healthiest because of the lower levels of arsenic, 90 parts per million versus 150 parts per million. But 90 parts per million is still a huge amount of arsenic. So what can we do about it? So many people around the world, especially in China and Asia, rice is a critical part of their diet, and without rice, there would be mass starvation. So there are a number of things that we can do to minimize the amount of arsenic in our rice. First, choose white rice. To start, we are going to first rinse our white rice. I've added 1 cup of rice to this strainer, and I am just going to rinse it real well before I add it to a kettle. I am adding that to the kettle. And by the way, you want to rinse your rice with water that's been filtered through either a reverse osmosis filter or some sort of filter That removes any arsenic from your water. I'm adding 10 cups of water to this rice, and it is going to sit overnight for at least 12 hours. I have here rice that has been sitting overnight for 12 hours, and now I am going to rinse it one more time before I cook it. That removes a large amount of the arsenic from the rice because remember, it's water soluble. I'm now putting it back in my kettle that I'm going to cook it in. And I want to add a total of about 10 cups of water to that rice. You want to cook it in a large, about 6 to 10 cups of water per cup of rice when you cook it. And then once it's cooked, you will drain that water off of it. And because it's soaked overnight, the grains have kind of opened up a little bit and it won't take as long to cook it. Once it comes to a boil, I cook it for about 5 to 7 minutes. Check it after about 5 minutes. See if it's done to your liking. If you've learned something so far, thank you for clicking that like button and subscribing. For more science-backed longevity ideas on how to live healthier and longer. Also, thank you for signing up for notifications. While our rice is cooking, let's talk a little bit more about arsenic and rice. One of the things I want to mention is that many of us, I know myself, fed my children that rice cereal with milk. The U.S. Department of Health now recommends that rice not be given to children under the age of 8 due to the high levels of arsenic, especially the infant cereals, because they contain up to 120 to 150 parts per million of arsenic. The other thing I want to mention is that much of the rice is fortified with vitamin A, a number of the B vitamins, vitamin E, folic acid, as well as iron. It is this fortification that helps improve the nutrition of vulnerable populations around the world. However, when you do that soaking and rinsing process that I'm showing you, it does remove much of that fortification. So this is also something to be aware of. If rice is a big part of your diet, a huge staple in your diet, you will want to add those vitamins and minerals back into your diet that have been removed by this process of removing the arsenic as well. Let's check our rice to see if it is ready to drain after cooking. It is now done, and let's go ahead and rinse it. I am putting it into a strainer here, and then I am going to rinse it with hot water. I don't want to rinse it with cold water because I don't want to cool it down too rapidly. Once your rice is drained and rinsed, you want to put it into a glass storage container and put it in the fridge. Remember we said earlier that rice has a high glycemic index, and that's why it's recommended that you eat the whole grain rice or the dark rice or brown rice. That high glycemic index can be altered by the cooking and cooling process. When you cook rice, all of the starch in the rice becomes gelatinous and it alters the chemical structure of the rice. Putting it in the fridge and letting it cool overnight changes the way that our body is able to absorb and utilize it, because when we let it cool slowly in the fridge overnight, not rapidly in the freezer, it recrystallizes in a form that makes the starches in it resistant starches, or starches that resist digestion and resist absorption as a carbohydrate source. So the rice that's been cooled overnight in the fridge now has a very low glycemic index. And in fact, that starch becomes food for your microbiome instead of sugar for your liver and your body. All of this helps prevent those sugar spikes that we see with white rice, also helps prevent that energy crash that we often get after we eat a high carbohydrate rice-based meal. So I'm putting this in the refrigerator and it's going to cool overnight. And I have here a bowl of rice that has cooled overnight. It was rinsed, soaked, cooked, drained, rinsed, and then chilled overnight. It is now ready to eat and enjoy. Thank you for watching this video, joining me today. And for more information about this process, about arsenic and rice, how it's toxic to our body and our brain, go to my website, growwithdrjoanette.com. Also there, you will find delicious recipes for you where you can incorporate rice into your diet as well. One more quick thing. If you do want to eat and enjoy the whole grain rices, what I recommend is a double soaking process. Soak it overnight, drain it, rinse it well, soak it for another 6 to 8 to 12 hours the next day. Rinse it, drain it, and then cook it and chill it. Here's to your health, and we'll see you next time on the Dr. Joanette channel.